All right, gentlemen, and if any ladies take this class in the future after it's recorded, we'll include everybody. I'm gonna get in front of the. I'll get in front of the camera. Hey, Charlie, it's nice to see you. So, anyways, so our topic this week is a little creepy. It's a little creepy. So it's slow. It's slow on there. So, anyways, we are going to discuss our lecture, but you're actually going to do the lecture yourself. So, everyone here is now experts on contextualization in the missional helix, right?
Right.
Experts. All right. So, today our topic is contextualization and Christian living. Okay, that's kind of the general topic. That's kind of what the reading deals with. So, with Christian living, we can talk a lot about spiritual disciplines. Prayer, scripture, worship, that sort of thing. We can also talk about spiritual gifts. How are people using their spiritual gifts? So how do you coach someone who has the gift of evangelism to do that well and to see how that fits the body? Those who don't have the gift of evangelism but do have the gift of hospitality, how are they using that for disciple making? Remember, what is the point of the missional helix? What's the end goal? It's the other SF.
Spiritual formation.
Spiritual formation, right. So we do all this for the sake of spiritual formation. Make sure your papers talk about how it helps spiritual formation. If you leave that part out of your paper, you fail. Okay? So this is a little, go ahead and make sure. Cause you can lay down a strategy.
Even if I do 10 pages?
Even if you do 10 pages, it better have spiritual formation. That is the point of the helix.
What if the last sentence is like, the spiritual formation is this? On the bottom of page 10.
It better be a good paragraph chunk summarizing, bringing it all together. So anyways, that's your paper. Hutch, you are now become the was it the
Maddie of the class? Yeah, the black sheep. I understand.
You're being so mean to me.
Kidding.
It's only been the past 2 weeks that I've maybe done something late, and it's like you expect too much of me, Dustin.
I do. I have high expectations.
I made one mistake.
He really sounds like me.
Like literally, I made one mistake, and Dustin's like, "What the heck? You're like the one who was doing your work." And I'm like, "I am doing my work."
Hutch, you came in like making 105s. Now you're only making 102s. You're slacking up, okay? We gotta address this.
See, it sucks being awesome. I hate it.
Okay, so back to the lecture today. So today's topic is. We gotta get through today's topic. Today's topic is contextualization in Christian living. So here's what I want our lecture to be. And for you guys who are online watching this, go ahead and get out a piece of paper right now. Charlie, you do the same live. Get out a piece of paper and go ahead and draw your helix T. Okay, so you two guys in a second, you're going to split the board. You're just going to draw out the helix box. Okay, and what I want you to do, whether you're here in the class physically or you guys online, take the next several minutes, and what I want you to do is to start working through the helix on this. Here's the ministry we want to implement. Here's the ministry that you are contextualizing. I want you to put yourself in the church that you are in now. Okay, in the ministry setting, the church you're in now. I know, Matt, you're doing kind of some Walltown stuff, so you can either do that or do your home church, either one. But I want you to look at your ministry setting now, and I want you to work through the helix how you would equip the people that you serve. Okay, those who you're ministering over, those who you are serving. I want you to actually start mapping out through the helix how you would train them to do contextualization themselves. So how are you going to equip them to not, we talk about equipping, we talk about this in the disciple making class, which you guys will have in the fall. We talk about how do you get people to see themselves as an everyday missionary. We're not going to reach every man, woman, and child in our city unless every man, woman, and child in our churches are engaging people with the gospel, right? So we kind of understand and encourage them to be a missionary. I want you to go a step further. How will you actually help them become a missiologist? Actually teach them how to themselves do the work of contextualization. So you guys have gone through, we're on week 14 now. You guys have gone through, over 95% of a class on contextualization. You're almost done. You're writing your final paper. Your guys' discussion boards have actually been really, really good. That's actually the reason, my idea for even putting these things into a book, because your content was actually really, really good and helped me think through a lot. And so I want you to just kind of practice in this lecture and take this time. So you guys online do the same thing. Go ahead and get out a piece of paper, draw it out, and what you will do, your quiz this week We're going to have a content quiz. It's going to cover your Coy reading, which is chapter 14, the last chapter. Your quiz will cover Coy reading, and you're just going to upload a picture of this. Okay? So take a picture of it on your phone and upload that or something. You guys would just take it on. You would take a picture of the board before you leave. So that's all I want you to do. All you got to do is upload, or you can type it out and summarize it, in the actual question. Either way you want to do it. I just want to see, see that you have done it. You get 100 for doing it for that part, which would just be like a 50-point question basically on the quiz. So it just lets me know that you have taught yourself the lecture. So go ahead and start, thinking through. You two guys just want to split the whiteboard and start mapping it out. We'll probably take a good 10 to 15 minutes to work through this, so it's going to be a little awkward silence there on the video. So you guys who are watching it, you can pause, fast forward to where you see us, jump back in or something like that. But go ahead and start doing that. You're developing a strategy for equipping your people, for doing contextualization. Okay, so you need to look at theological reflection. Why should we equip an average lay member person to do this? Shouldn't this be for the seminary professor and the missiologist? Well, how do you equip every single person to think this way? Cultural analysis. What about your setting where you are now that you want to coach them through? What questions you want to help them to work through as they are addressing? When you do, you want to do multiple colors, don't you? Don't blend my colors too much. I don't like that. I'm very picky about that kind of stuff. Yeah, you got that. So, and then historical perspective. How has your church done in equipping people for thinking this level of missionary or even your community? And then strategy formation. What are you going to do? You're going to training events. You're going to write your own 6-week study curriculum, or you're going to take sermon series. What's it going to be? So go ahead and start mapping that out. And Charlie, if you have any questions there online, just pipe in and or say something, and be glad to answer for you guys.
Yeah, just to clarify, so I'm like walking through how I would equip my band members to do contextualization.
Yeah, exactly. So you can take your band members and apply it to the worship ministry at your church.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe it needs to be part of your strategy formation is equipping them to be engaged in local music venues in order to bridge relationships, and how is that going to help the overall mission of the church, that sort of thing. So, you're just basically you're doing the work of, I got to equip my people for this. So how am I going to do that? And use a helix to do that.
Life on Missionaries passport.
That's my background. I thought it was a really cute picture. Bow tie, suspenders. He's a world traveler at age 6 months.
That's impressive.
Or 7 months.
Taking all this down so I can read it. All right. So we need to ask and answer questions, like write out.
Yeah, but get yours is a little bit backwards, but you're fine. Just make sure you creative people think backwards. I get it. Thank you for almost thinking that way. Put your CA there. Always do historical perspective back.
No, it's right there.
You guys are killing me. But you're fine because I can still follow it. Actually, in his book, he starts here and goes this way. I have to start palm left. It's just the way I work. So,
all right. So we have to. You would just want us to write out ideas, like.
Yeah. So when you're thinking theologically, what scriptures will you take your group to? Well,
Wait, I forgot about that part. I went to Bible college. I didn't even think about that.
I have to use the Bible in this?
Well, no, I mean, okay, so where in the Bible, you Potter heathen, where in the Bible would this come in handy, like in the book of Acts? That was creepy.
Acts 17.
Okay, Acts 17.
Hey, I caught it. It's mine.
Hey, think of 1 Corinthians, though. In 1 Corinthians, what are we even looking at?
All of it.
Yeah, he's helping them think through. So, but remember, this is why should you equip? Ephesians 4:12.
Ooh, I got a good one. Are we allowed to use our Bible?
Yeah, you can use anything. You can use a textbook, Bible. I can pull up some old notes.
I'm using Google. 28 Bible verses about contextualization.
Hey, that's my blog post from last year.
How can I compete with this?
Remember, theological reflection is not just finding scripture. it's also
I know, but
building a theology of mission. How does it play into the Great Commission?
oh, I got you.
Cool. Matt just finished as well. So, all right, let's kind of discuss them a little bit, and we'll do the first two here, since I just tweeted. I didn't copy you guys, but then you can go in there and do it. I didn't have enough space to put your names in. I'll reply on mine. That's what I'll do. Okay. So, Matt Malin, how about you walk us through yours?
All right.
Explain your ministry setting, what your church looks like, and that sort of thing, and then walk us through your helix.
So the church I'm in does not have a traditional setup. In fact, it's anything but traditional in the sense that, yes, there's music, there's teaching, but it's more along the lines of let's do what we feel when we want. He explained it to me. David Parsons explained it to me in the sense of, it's a culture that you can't just walk in and expect to be normal with. They don't want your typical church service, and so it's more along the lines of we're going to teach the word, but it's going to be a conversation instead of one person up here preaching at you. We're going to talk. We're going to keep your interest because they typically have the tendency to kind of doze off or lose focus.
Mostly young kids too, right?
Yeah. So typically they have one person sitting at one end of the room and the other person on the other end of the room, and they're both talking about the sermon. That way the people's heads constantly moving back and forth, keeping their attention. It was weird at first. I didn't necessarily like it, but I see why it's useful. Cool. So then we do some music, and it's more along the lines of let's just play whatever we want. There's no schedule. There's no organization. It just happens. And so understanding this is because of the culture that they're in. There really is no organization of the culture, and it may seem strange to them if it was. So in terms of Walktown, theological reflection, what does the Bible say about the contextualization word? 1 Corinthians 9 through 23. It says, "For it is written, the law of Moses, do not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain. Is it about oxen that God is concerned? Surely he says this for us, doesn't he? Yes, this was written for us because whoever plows and threshes to be able to do so in the hope of sharing in the harvest." I'm trying to find, where is it? Oh, yes. Okay, it says, "Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I become like a Jew to win the Jews. To those who are under the law, I become like one under the law, so as to win those under law." So basically, he's saying I'm contextualizing. I'm walking in, I'm becoming the culture around me so that I can accurately display the gospel for them in a way that's going to make sense to them. He's not saying I divulge in their practices. He's not saying, I participate in their sin. I don't do things that go against the word, but I do so in a way that makes the gospel culturally relevant in a way that still, it does not, what's the word? It doesn't nullify. Yes, what the Bible says. All right. So the Bible obviously calls us the disciple in the Great Commission. Man was made in God's image and inherently valuable, Genesis 1. Culture shapes our perspective. The Jewish customs of sacrifice and circumcision were a massive issue that Paul and a lot of the apostles had to deal with, so that's what they spent their time talking about. That's what they spent their time relating the Bible and the gospel to.
And essentially, it was the everyday people of the church who were dealing with the Acts 15 issue.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the elders who were meeting. Right. It was this issue is coming from the church. It was the church is saying this. It was actually the congregation at the end says this is what we want to say. It's what we approve. So that's a good analysis.
Culturally speaking, people want to be known and people want to be loved. It doesn't matter if you're poor, if you're barely getting by, or if you're you got money coming out of nooks and crannies you didn't even know you had. You want to be known. You want to be loved. We were made for a relationship. Being made in the image of God, it gives us that inherent value, that inherent desire. And so moving on from that, just for an example, African Americans do not have the same cultural preferences as Arabs, Asians, white Americans. we come from different places, different backgrounds. Everything about us makes us unique in the sense that we are not all the same, even though we don't even look the same. Poverty, middle class, wealthy class systems affect your lifestyle perspective. I've said that already. Poverty, and speaking specifically for Waughtown, poverty runs rampant through Waughtown. That is what they know, that is what they live, and so that is their everyday life. Historically speaking, churches in the area have fed off of that notion that they are poor. So a lot of prosperity gospel. There are a lot of churches down there. We went down there. You, Derek, Charlie. Yeah, Charlie was there. I remember talking about that. A lot of the churches have shoved the prosperity gospel down these people's throats, and so ultimately there is a culture of mistrust for people who claim to be godly. So knowing that, we move into the strategic formation. The mindset must be gospel redeeming relationships. It's not about material alleviation, it's spiritual alleviation. There's nothing wrong with alleviating material needs. Christ even did that, but Christ's ultimate goal was meeting the need where their spirit was lacking. He was trying to redeem the relationship where creation was broken because of sin, and that included the spiritual life and the material life. Something David told me, it's culture, not color. And that basically means their behavior extends from an ignorance of God, not a hatred. Yeah. The majority of people in Waughtown have never even heard the gospel, yet there are churches everywhere. And so it's not a matter of them hating God. It's not a matter of them growing up in a culture that blames God for where they're at. They just know nothing about Him.
Well, there's actually, for the ones that the experience I've had down there, there's at least a level of respect for God.
Yeah.
In the sense that, like, the moms and grandmas will put the kids on the bus to go to a church. As long as you have church on the side of the bus, they'll just let the kids go. No questions asked. The first time they met me, I had 40 kids on the bus, and I've just met all these parents. I mean, I went to every door and said, "Hey, is it okay if we do this?" But, "Oh yeah, take them." Mm-hmm. Didn't even ask what the name of the church was. We just had a church on the side, and so there's a respect for God and that sort of thing, but not necessarily a knowledge of who He is. Yeah, that's good.
So typically, the plan really doesn't have to be that complex. It doesn't need to be that complex. The plan is cultural evaluation with physical involvement, meaning training sessions like we're doing now with the Waughtown team, basically saying, okay, those of you who aren't really knowledgeable on what contextualization is, this is why they are the way they are, this is why they do what they do, but we're going to get you into Waughtown and you're going to get hands-on experience, because the only way you're going to learn for yourself is by accurately applying what we're teaching in these training sessions to the situations that happen when they come up.
So you designed this really thinking of like the students that you've been kind of helping equip from Piedmont. Be interesting, for a thought when you're bored and have time to think. So how would you? Because I think this is really, really good. How would you then use this to start training the local people who you're seeing coming to Christ and who you're helping? What would you change to get them to start thinking through this kind of stuff? That'd be something that you don't have to do it right now, but that'd be something to kind of think through. Because you're working with a team right now. You're coaching people who aren't coming out of a poverty situation, and they're stepping into it. They're getting to know Waughtown as a new context, very different from the one that they're familiar with. So you're walking them through that. But then you will also one day, if you were to stay there in ministry and 5 years down the road, more things are happening, it's more of a church established, whatever it is, what would you be doing to train the local people? That would be your next phase. Would be, okay, where in my strategy formation is training up the indigenous leaders that I will be doing that kind of thing. That's always something to think about. So, well done, thanks, sir. Hutch, you ready? Pass. No, you don't get a pass.
Matt, maybe take a chair on that side. So.
Wait, what? Oh. Or do that. That works. That's what be a real pain. All right, Hutch. Tell us about the people that you serve and you minister over.
Well, I'm the youth pastor at Harvest High Point. I'm on your way. I'm sorry. I know it's.
You're good. You're okay.
I'm the youth pastor at Harvest High Point. It's a new church plant that started October 2nd, 2015. I came on right at New Year's. We actually, since we're growing, we're still finding ways how we can impact High Point. So one thing that I actually will be doing this summer, actually not just youth group, but me and one of the other interns who's coming on this summer. I haven't met him yet, but we're going to be trying to plan more college ministry stuff too. So we're approaching it from kind of a missional mindset and some possible ministries to start, because that's one thing Matt wants us to look. The pastor's name's Matt as well. It's really confusing. I'm Matt. Senior pastor's name's Matt. The IT guy's name's Matt. So there's 3 Matts at the church. So when someone says something about Matt, we get confused a lot in our rules. Anyway, so tangent. So High Point, fun fact, I've lived there since I was probably 8. We moved down from Boone, but my mom and dad are both originally from High Point. Even though my dad went out west for school for a while, and then I was born and came back. But High Point is home of the furniture market. It's still considered the furniture capital of the world, even though a lot of our economy is over there. It's still the largest kind of, you could almost say, textile, still stuff manufactured in the U.S. High Point actually used to be the richest city per capita in North Carolina, and it's still in the top 3. Cool. Interesting fact about High Point as well. High Point has a Bentley dealership, and it was the first city in the entire Southeast, even before Atlanta and Miami, to get one. On the Eastern Seaboard, it was one of the first ones.
High Point had a Bentley dealership?
Yes, because you have all these major furniture companies are owned by families still, like Rooms to Go, and all those are still owned by families who live in High Point still. So even though the city itself has since seen a bigger gap, of course, the ones who still own the companies are still. But even now, High Point is still one of the richest ones in North Carolina per capita. High Point got its name, actually, interestingly enough, because of the rail lines in North Carolina. It was the highest point, both east of the coast, going up to the mountains. So it connected, and it actually got its name. Its nickname is on the edge of in the middle of nowhere, on the edge of everywhere. Because High Point in the Triad kind of sits off to the distance from Greensboro and Winston, but if you notice, it borders all like it takes me just as long to get to Winston as it does to Greensboro, as it does to Asheboro. It's right there, and that's why High Point strategically became big there, because the mountains could ship their goods into High Point easily, which could easily distribute it from Winston, Greensboro to Charlotte, the coast.
Hit 40, 85, do whatever.
Well, now you have that, but I'm saying even the rail line back in the day. Cool. So, with that being said, High Point, though, has since seen a big job loss. Because of the furniture industry leaving, a lot of people now have to either work in Greensboro or Winston. So High Point itself, though the population is growing, in High Point the job growth hasn't happened much. So of course, because of that, there's become a bigger gap between. High Point also has the 3rd largest refugee population in North Carolina now, from Burma and Laos.
I've heard that before. Yeah.
World Relief, actually, their East Coast headquarters is in High Point, North Carolina.
I had a friend who worked there.
So many churches in High Point now are actually getting on that. We're realizing that through God's sovereignty, He's brought people from these countries that we wouldn't have access to our backyard. So, with that being said, so one thing too is the flux of college students as well. Guilford Technical Community College is the 2nd largest community college in the state of North Carolina, only behind Wake Tech. So that's so one of the 2 ministries that I know we've talked about trying to focus on that I would have a passion for would be the college ministries, as well as the refugee ministries. So one thing though that I've had verses is 1 Corinthians 18:25 is basically when Paul's talking about, the cross is folly to those who don't understand it, but it's the wisdom of God. Basically what Paul's setting up in 1 Corinthians is he's almost giving an apologetic for the truth behind the word and how we're simply told to follow it and preach it. And it's basically towards a very skeptical society. Well, most of our cities, including a city like High Point with a lot of college students, has a lot of people who are skeptical of the gospel, which I'll get into that in a minute. Of course, Matthew 28, the Great Commission, we're simply called to go. And going doesn't mean you necessarily have to go overseas. It means that you literally go where you're planted. We have people 10 minutes from us who don't even speak English yet. So, we go, we make disciples. So basically, even with me with the youth group, most of my students in my youth group, like I've taught the dozen before, 90% of them either go to Wesleyan Christian Academy, which I went to for a while, or High Point Christian Academy. Almost 9% of my students are educated in a Christian high school since kindergarten all the way through. So a lot of them, when they come to youth group, are getting Bible all throughout the week. They're getting UTT, which is Understanding the Times, based on an apologetic class they have to take. They're getting everything from a Christian perspective. So because of that, when they come to youth group, it's like struggling with, where can I meet them at? Where can I find out where they are? And then also to make them understand the importance of it. It's not enough that you just know this stuff, but actually believe it and live it out. So one thing that we talk about, we've been doing is a Go series, talking about what it means to actually look like every day being a follower of God. And it's not just going knocking on people's doors, handing out a gospel tract, like how it can be just with the people in your school, how it can be with people you interact with.
What does everyday mission look like?
Yeah, basically. Of course, so two things that fall under that was, main one, obviously, Jesus commanded that we make disciples. He had disciples himself. He spent time with them. He poured into them constantly. It's funny how even in like the Gospel of Matthew, they ask the same questions over and over, and he still corrects them because he's constantly, discipling his disciples. And then the other one, when Paul writes to Timothy, I think it's in 2 Timothy, when he commands him to endure hardship, the work of evangelists, fulfill the ministry. Basically, when you're in everyday ministry, discipleship's not easy. Discipleship isn't just, hey, my name's so-and-so, get to know them, and then that's it. Everyday missionary is you build relationships with people. So, like, I intentionally go to the same two coffee shops because I'm getting to know the people who work there. I already know that some of them aren't Christians. I'm building that relationship with them. And so we're trying to teach our students, what does that look like to build relationships with those you encounter? Like, for instance, many of the students volunteer in the Miracle League in High Point, which is basically kind of like for underprivileged kids so they can play sports. And the Miracle League also has another league that's like Special Olympics. Getting to know these families and ministering to them is a way that you can connect and gospel seeds and be like, hey, where do you go to church? Maybe even find out what their view is on church. So we're trying to teach them, what does it look like to live every day as a follower of Christ, and it's not just a feeling or knowing stuff. And you can't just assume you're a Christian because of that.
Let's make sure we have time.
Yeah. So the cultural analysis, real fast. This I'll go real quickly now. HPU students. HPU is the fastest growing private institution in High Point. Or not in High Point, in North Carolina. It's becoming a very out-of-state school. A lot of kids from Northeast, a lot of money too. Most of the kids who go to school there come from upper middle class to actually the upper class. But there's actually really no ministry outreaches on campus that have been successful. The administration at High Point almost kind of tries to push them away. Elevation had a plant there, it didn't work out. And the reason why I say that we're not here to critique their ministry one another is Elevation's been one of those to where it's been really popular, and even it failed. Multiple churches, though, local churches in High Point, have not really tried to reach out to the students, which is interesting. So we actually, Matt, after our pastor started a Monday night Bible study, he partnered with the college minister at Green Street Baptist Church. They started a Monday night Bible study. They have 44 students come. But we actually have some come to our church now, and they come to our college group. So starting that, but one college that gets overlooked is the community college students. We're actually right now, and this is actually a real ministry that we talked about in the office yesterday. It's actually cool that you had us do this. We're trying to start a ministry on GTCC. They have two campuses in High Point. They have the Jamestown and the downtown campus. The community colleges, compared to a university, the demographic at community college is always the most diverse because you're going to have people from different walks of life, both economically, socially, and age-wise. You have people from our age, college-age students in their teens to early 20s, to adults who are having to re-equip themselves because they lost their job. Where that is, there's lots of brokenness, there's lots of confusion, there's even lots of questioning. So we're actually going to try to start. So one culture analysis is analyzing how many students are in, like, not only at GTech and High Point, but what the gospel presence seems to be, and there seems to really not be any. And of course, I already talked about there's a growing refugee population in High Point from Burma and Laos especially. Some churches even are trying to start like getting like almost an indigenous person to almost help out with that. So then historical perspective, High Point's in the Bible Belt. So you have many churches on every corner. We even have a Sikh temple now. There's a Baha'i, which is like, it combines all of them or whatever, like Baha'i or however you say it. Baha'i. And then of course you have two Roman Catholics, lots of all the other Protestant. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's an Anglican and an Episcopalian too. So you have all these flux of churches, but many have been closing. And I actually know about 4 or 5 Baptist churches who in the past few years have actually tried to merge their congregations. So historically also in High Point, the churches actually were a lot of times associated with social, like what I mean by perspective was it was almost a way to socialize. The church was how you socialized in High Point. Most churches, you identified where someone went to school by where they went to church. Like, for instance, Emerywood Baptist Church, almost everybody lived in Emerywood, which is the country club, and all their students, all their kids either went to Westchester Country Day School or High Point Central. And it's actually interesting how even now, when I meet people from High Point, they find out which part of High Point I'm from. They're, oh, you probably went to Ledford or Wesleyan, didn't you? I did. They probably, it's so. Historically, that was used as that. But then also, the church, like most cities in the South, that's why I didn't really have to elaborate on it, and Matt can hit on it too. It started out strong, it's really lost its influence, and now even there's more of people don't want to embrace it because of afraid of legalism, the issues like right now that even we're facing in our own state with same-sex marriage and stuff like that. So addressing that, how do we stand on what the Bible teaches, and looking what High Point has historically stood on that. So the strategy formations that we're looking at actually doing to start a college ministry on the local college campuses. So one thing we actually really discussed about doing was having a block party. Basically, we would have kind of games and stuff, for college students, free food, because college students always love free food. And just more of a way and coffee. We actually have a family who goes to our church who own the coffee roastery in High Point. Stuff like that, just to connect with the students. That's one thing we can do to do that. And then also by doing that and getting involved, we can find out where these students are at, get to know them on a personal level, and get to know the culture better. GTCC would be a little bit easier than High Point because High Point is a gated private school to where if you don't really know someone there, you can't just visit. You have to almost schedule a visit. So it's almost like it's kind of funny how it's gated off to get to. And then, of course, help the refugees. We actually had a family in our church who used to be missionaries over in Vietnam. They come to our church now, and they're really passionate. They have even talked about moving to the neighborhood because almost all these refugees tend to live in the same neighborhood. They've talked about actually moving their family to that neighborhood, to which we could even do a block party for this too to get to know the refugees. Of the two, the reason why I put these two is these are two that we're actually trying to focus on, and we're still trying to play with which ones are we trying to do. We want to find a way to start the college ministries, but this is more of just building relationships. Right now, we're going to try to target this more, mainly just because of the growing refugee population and the gospel sown. So all that, the spiritual formation is, for me as the youth pastor, letting my students understand what it means to be a disciple of Christ. One curriculum we're probably going to be going through this summer is Multiply by Francis Chan. I'm actually going to go through the senior high students, hopefully. Basically what that's going to do is teaching them, you know this stuff, or maybe you believe it and you profess, but now faith, like in James 1, isn't just hearing the word, it's doing the word. And that's kind of where we are, because many of my students have come to me, they struggle with what I struggled with in high school is, I don't know if I know enough to evangelize. When really, because they grew up Christian, they're like a sponge. They probably know more than they realize. They just haven't really squeezed any of it out. So now we're going to focus on the doing aspect.
Cool. So as far as equipping your everyday people, I know you guys are working through what it would like to start a college ministry and what it means to help the refugees. You got one family looking to maybe move there, so that's good. So how are you equipping them? And so I'm sure you guys are probably thinking, how do we make sure that it's not just a pastor starting a college ministry? How do we equip families or other students and that sort of thing? So we do have some High Point students, and that's what we've done essentially at 151 is we've helped them plan. That's why we're on their campus and they're helping lead more strategically. So. All right, very well done. Well, Charlie, we got about 10 minutes left of class. Why don't you finish us out?
Cool. I'll try to fly through this. Well, I don't have that much anyway. Okay, I did the worship ministry. I more so contextualized what what I ran through was like the definition of worship, because I think that's a good starting point. And the point is to get the worship team to understand that. Even referring to it as the worship ministry or the worship team or me as the worship leader is kind of misleading, and I'll get to that in historical perspective. But to get them to a point where they understand what biblical worship is, and then can implement it, and it can kind of permeate the rest of the church through them. So with theological reflection, I've got worship is the only appropriate response to God. It's not just an external act, but an act with proper motivation, and we see that straight from the beginning with Cain and Abel. They both brought sufficient offering, but one was from a certain attitude and one was from the other, and we see that. We must worship in truth, so understanding accurate truth about God, we must read His Word and pray and understand Him in order to worship Him. It's meaningless if we worship based on inaccurate information. And then worship is also a lifestyle in 1 Corinthians 10:31, where Paul says, all that you do it to the glory of God. So we see that it's not just singing, and that's a big thing. So then under cultural analysis, I have that everyone worships something, even though we don't have idols as blatant as those that they had in biblical times. We're not worshiping, most of the time we're not worshiping like a gold idol or anything, but we do have idols that we set up. And I borrowed something Louis Giglio said in a book, that we worship what we value most and what we devote the majority of our time to. And that's really all I had for cultural analysis. So I'll move on to historical perspective. I put that in recent history. Worship has been relegated just to music, or at the very least just to the Sunday morning service. And like I was saying earlier, this is evident in the title worship pastor. And so I put, is the preacher not also a worship leader, or are small group leaders not worship leaders? Are they not leading his people in worship of Him?
That's very cool.
Yeah. So moving on, strategy formation. Practically, if I'm dealing with a band, something I try to do and I would have them do is to never use language that's going to further that idea. Like, don't say, let's begin to worship when we're about to sing, or any other language that equates it with just music. And when I pray, I'll often pray and say something about continuing to worship as we give a sermon, continuing to worship as we do offering, as we do communion, stuff like that. And then less practically, more so an idealistic thing, when doing anything, just to be more conscious of that 1 Corinthians 10 fact that anything you do can be done for His glory, if you're doing it with the right attitude.
Very good, very good. I like your application to the worship ministry, and so I guess that whenever the guy pulls the pick out of his pocket and straps on the guitar, that's not necessarily when worship begins, because he's got his guitar on. So that's a tough thing to try to encourage. How are we worshiping, daily, and then Sunday's just us worshiping together, So I like that. So guys, I hope that this was helpful for you to think through, because when you guys, you're already in local ministry already, and when you graduate, you maybe step into more full-time roles, or you may even be going to different churches to minister once you graduate. Who knows? But one of the things that I think we overlook in local church ministries, we really get focused on teaching people content, but not teaching them how to do ministry. And so we say, evangelize, share the gospel, make disciples, evangelize, share the gospel, make disciples. But a lot of times, especially new believers and believers who have been in weak churches, they need someone to really hold their hand for a while and give them some very practical tools and walk them through what this looks like. And so, I hope this exercise kind of helps you think through what that would look like as you continually train. I mean,
remember Ephesians 4:12, we are to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, not do it all ourselves. And so God has called you to be a equipper of people. He's put you in those roles to be an equipper, and all of you are in an equipping role in some way. And don't take what you read in the textbook and what you learn in class or whatever else, and not just in this class, but in all of them. Don't let it stay in the classroom. Don't let it stay on Blackboard. Use the helix for future stuff when you're thinking, okay, we need to start a college ministry on Guilford Tech. So what does that look like? Well, how we're going to analyze and run Guilford Tech through the helix so that we can get our people better engaging it. So